For breakfast, you slather your avocado with cream cheese on some lightly toasted rye. For lunch, your prosciutto with black olives and a little parmesan is sandwiched between two thick crusty slices of Neapolitan bread. And for dinner, you wash down your chicken Kiev with a nice frothy schooner of boutique wheat beer. Yes, as a people, we have a long-standing romance with wheat and grains. We've been consuming wheat and grains over millennia, and they don't seem to have done us too much harm, right? Well, what if the wheat we're consuming today is very different from what it was even just 60, 70 years back? And what if the harms of wheat are building up in our bodies just without our awareness? Author of #1 bestseller Wheat Belly, Dr. William Davis joins us today to expose wheat and grains for all that they are. 25 years into being a cardiologist, Dr. Davis' attention switched sharply to gut health when he saw the dramatic results that simple diet changes brought to his heart patients. Today we'll also talk about the power of the microbiome and just how it could factor into Alzheimer's prevention. Welcome to Vital Signs, where we learn how to get healthier from all angles, from the biochemical and nutritional to the things we do that nourish our minds and our souls. I'm Brendan Fallon. Dr. Davis, it's fantastic to have you back on Vital Signs again.
Oh, thanks for the invitation.
One of your books is Wheat Gut. I understand you were practicing cardiology when you came to this understanding that consumption of wheat and grains can impact heart health. How does that work exactly?
You know, Wheat Gut's not a bad title, but it's Wheat Belly.
Oh, sorry, Wheat Belly.
I like the Wheat Gut idea, though. Well, so that's right. So wheat consumption and related grains, we don't think of grains, Brandon, as being promiscuous, but they are. They share genetics quite freely. So for instance, rye, if you have rye bread and compare it to whole wheat bread, they look and smell differently, right? But rye is almost identical genetically, just like you're a good looking young man, but you know what? You're almost identical genetically to a chimpanzee. About 98% overlap, but we can tell the difference. Well, so there's a lot of overlap in the genetics and thereby the qualities of wheat and grains. And wheat and grains share a carbohydrate called amylopectin A. It's a very uniquely and highly digestible carbohydrate that triggers the formation of small LDL particles. We have this terrible fiction being propagated all throughout the world, and that is that cholesterol, like LDL cholesterol, causes heart disease. It does not cause heart disease. It was meant to be a crude and indirect marker for the real factors that cause heart disease, such as LDL particles, but specifically small LDL particles. Because they're small, the liver doesn't recognize them. They circulate in the bloodstream for prolonged periods, unlike normal, natural, large LDL particles. Small LDL particles persist for extended periods. They're much more prone to oxidation, glycation, much more adherent to the walls of arteries, much more likely to instigate inflammation in the arteriole. Small LDL is the driving cause for heart disease, not LDL cholesterol. Why don't we hear more about it? Because the solution is nutritional. There's no pot of gold for the pharmaceutical industry, and so the sales reps don't hawk diet. They sell drugs because there are hundreds of billions of dollars at stake here. So we hear nothing about the real causes, small LDL and others. There's other causes too that have nothing to do with cholesterol. So this is a question I asked many years ago. What foods, and this science is quite well sorted out, what foods, what phenomena cause an excess of small LDL particles and thereby sudden cardiac death, heart attack, angina, need for bypass stents? What foods cause that? Wheat, grains, and sugars, period. Not bacon, not eggs, not pork, none of those things. Wheat, grains, and sugars. So if you are told a heart-healthy diet is low in fat and saturated fat, rich in healthy whole grains, you've been given a formula to have heart disease. So that's one phenomenon. There's other reasons why the modern diet, as advocated in dietary guidelines, is actually a formula for developing heart disease.
What is it exactly in wheat and grains that causes so many small LDL particles to be created?
So because the amylopectin A is highly digestible, it gets to the liver. The liver it's a little complicated, I'm sorry. The liver has a great capacity for a process called liver de novo lipogenesis. All that means is the liver is very good at converting those carbohydrates, like amylopectin A, to triglycerides, fats. So conversion of sugars to triglycerides, to fats. De novo lipogenesis, making fat out of nothing, essentially, right? Well, that triglycerides can't float free. So fats like triglycerides and cholesterol can't float freely in the blood. Because if they did, you know how you have Italian dressing or oil and vinegar and you shake it and it mixes, but then it separates rapidly. Oil on top, vinegar or water on the bottom. So oils coalesce. So if you had fats in your bloodstream, triglycerides or cholesterol, they will coalesce and it'll kill you within minutes because you'll infarct or cut off blood flow to tissues, into capillaries. So fats can't float through the bloodstream freely. They must reside or ride on a protein particle and make it water soluble. So those are called lipoproteins, fat-carrying proteins. So triglycerides made by the liver by converting amylopectin A and sugars to triglycerides has to be packaged upon release into a lipoprotein. And that lipoprotein is called very low density lipoprotein, VLDL, very triglyceride rich. Well, that VLDL particle interacts with LDL particles, makes it triglyceride enriched, and there's a series of complex reactions that creates that very harmful small LDL. So it's a little bit of a complex pathway, but the bottom line here, it gets started by consumption of the amylopectin A of grains and sugars.
Okay. I think if we're talking about wheat and grains, we also have to talk about rice as well. It's kind of in the same family. And I know that you're half Japanese, so you have a certain rice connection. So what is your take on rice?
So rice is also a grain, seed of a grass. So one of the fundamental problems with eating seeds of grasses that, by the way, humans did not consume for 99.6% of our time on this planet. So consuming seeds of grasses is a relatively, people think, oh, we've been doing it forever. No, we've been doing it a very brief time, speaking anthropologically. Well, the worst wheat of all, the worst grain of all is modern high-yield semi-dwarf wheat. That's 99% of all wheat now. The product of genetics research, essentially a laboratory creation. Next is traditional wheat, and then we go down the line of rye, barley, millet, etc. At the most benign end is rice. Now, we have to be careful about our thinking here. So you guys know that if something is harmful, let's say full tar unfiltered cigarettes, and we replace it with something a little less harmful, let's say filtered low tar cigarettes, and we see some kind of a drop, let's say in lung cancer and heart disease, but there's still a lot of it. Does that mean smoking filtered low tar cigarettes are therefore good for you? No. So over and over, you'll see that flawed thinking operating in nutrition. Replace something bad with something less bad, and there's a modest reduction in danger or increase in safety. The less bad thing must therefore be good. That's not true. That's not how logic works. Here's another area. If we replace the awful American diet with a Mediterranean diet, and there's less harm or a little bit of benefit, the Mediterranean diet must therefore be ideal. You can't say that. That is not the conclusion you can reach. So same kind of thing here. Just because rice is less harmful doesn't make it good. And the primary reason, so rice has very little protein. So we can't blame rice for all those effects that come from protein, like wheat germ agglutinin, bowel toxin, gliadin-derived opioid peptides, by the way, that drive appetite, massive appetite stimulation. That's not present to any degree in rice.
Opioid-derived. Wow.
Yes. So the
makes sense.
So in wheat and related grains like the secalin and rye, the hordein and barley, and the zein and corn, these are proteins that can't be digested fully, but they yield opioid peptides that are very potent appetite stimulants. That's why you'll find wheat or other grains in virtually every processed food to stimulate your appetite, stimulate sales.
Wow. Oh, the dots are connecting.
Rice doesn't have that. It's almost pure sugar, amylopectin. And so we have that problem. So the Japanese, so I'm half Japanese. Japanese have better track record of health, but they're not impervious to health. This same kind of fiction applies in France. They say the French paradox. They eat a lot of fat, yet have much less heart disease. But they still do have heart disease and dementia and cancers and other things. So it's not as if they're impervious to these things. They just have a little less than we have. So we got to be clear on our thinking. So rice, via amylopectin, triggers small LDL particles, triggers insulin resistance, the process that leads to dementia, type 2 diabetes, coronary disease, breast cancer. So it has that. Now we have the recently uncovered issue that rice is a natural concentrator of arsenic. Now, what's not clear is so there's acute toxicity with arsenic that occurs in places like Bangladesh because they eat rice, but they also have tainted water, contend with arsenic. But in a place that has clean water like Japan, it's not quite clear if consumption of lots of rice leads to a chronic issue, like mostly cancer. So that's being explored. Tough question to answer.